So we are at my favourite time of year for everything really, for celebrations. We've got the holiday season and Christmas just around the corner. November is also my birthday month. It's all very exciting, and in amongst that there is an event on BookTube that is solely responsible for bringing me back to reading after a huge absence as a reader. And it's what started off my whole DIY literature degree planning, and that's GothLitNovember. Now, GothLitNovember is an event where you are encouraged to read Gothic literature throughout the whole of November, but historically all of us that take part in it, we tend to roll our Gothic reading over into December. It just feels like the right time of year. Like the Victorian times, they would start reading ghost stories to each other around Christmas time. There is something about the silvery coldness of winter and this time of year that feels incredibly Gothic, and it just feels so right to cozy on up with Gothic literature. So this event is the brainchild of the wonderful Rachel over at Second Thoughts About the Mission. It also is the brainchild of the amazing Bailey Jean. I will link both of their channels down below in the description box. My plan is to read throughout November, December, January and into February, which is my event of Fanguary, which is vampire fiction. I've decided that I love the Gothic so much, I want to read 4 months of sort of Gothic based studies and literature reading. So there's a big pile of possibilities here, but it's going to extend beyond November. Let me show you what I plan to read in November, all the possibilities. The first one, let me just mention this one because this one is not Gothic, but I am committed to reading this one. So I said before, my TBR pile, it's like a cake and cherries TBR pile. There are some books I am definitely going to read. That makes up the cake. The rest are just cherries that I can pick from. But because I'm taking part in the Thomas Hardy readathon with Jen the Librarian, November's read is The Return of the Native. So although it's not Gothic, that is part of my cake. That is one that I definitely do need to read, and I am really looking forward to that. So let's talk about my Gothic studies so far. When I started my DIY literature degree this year, and I realised Gothic, I wanted that as part of it, it was very quickly obvious that the Gothic is such a huge subject. You've got early Gothic, you've got Southern Gothic, you've got Victorian Gothic, you've got contemporary Gothic, you've got all sorts of Gothic aspects going on that I was just really out of my depth. So I had to fine tune it down, and I decided just to focus on early Gothic with a focus on the work of Anne Radcliffe, who I'd never read before at the start of the year. So what I've read so far, I've read The Italian, which I loved. Then I read The Romance of the Forest, which is my favourite so far. Also read A Sicilian Romance. So I've read 3 so far and realised that I am a massive Anne Radcliffe fan. So the goal now is to try and get all of her works read before the end of the year. Now, what I want to do for GothLitNovember is to repeat something that I did earlier in the year. So when I read The Romance of the Forest, I read this in Jane Austen July. I read it alongside the group read for Jane Austen July, which was Jane Austen's Emma. So I kind of read one after the other, and it was just so fantastic doing that. Of course, Jane Austen was a fan of Anne Radcliffe. She does even reference this book in her novel Emma, and it was just fantastic to put them next to each other. To compare the 2 books together, to read them next to each other, was so fantastic, not only for highlighting things that I love about Anne Radcliffe, but it also highlighted things I loved about Jane Austen. They are very different. Anne Radcliffe is broad and expansive and wild, whereas Jane Austen is much more contained and focusing on the minutiae of everyday life. And I think the opposites that these two authors presented, reading next to each other, was so fantastic. It made me understand the writing styles of each of these authors just by comparison and how opposite they were, and I loved it. So that was a great experience, and in GothLitNovember I really want to replicate or attempt to replicate that. So I have 2 Gothic novels, one by Jane Austen and one by Anne Radcliffe. So I've got The Mysteries of Udolpho, which is a chunker. This comes in at over 650 pages. I think, along with the Italian, I think it's one of Anne Radcliffe's better known works. It's one I've not read yet. I'm really keen to get to it. And I'm going to read it alongside Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which is a satirical novel based on like a friendly kind of dig and laugh at the novels of Anne Radcliffe. So I think, again, that will be a really interesting read, putting them together, and I've been really looking forward to GothLitNovember to do this. This has been planned all year, so those 2 are definite reads for my Gothic reading in November. But I also really wanted to get to some contemporary Gothic as well. Now this, The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, has been sitting on my shelf for such a long time, for years actually, and I've just really wanted to read it. So this is a Gothic novel set in marshland. I think there are curious beasts and strange beasts, and there's fear mongering around the people for this historical creature called the Essex Serpent, which the locals think is killing people. Very Gothic, very marshlandy. After reading Great Expectations last month, I just really wanted another marshland setting again, because it was a setting that I really loved. So I think this is going to go in my cake pile as well, because it also fits my Candy Reading Challenge prompt of No Grey November, to read a colourful or shiny book. I mean, look at that cover. Isn't that just gorgeous? And the end papers as well are just so lovely. So that would fit mine. It's also got creepy creatures, I think, in here. So that would push me out of my comfort zone. So it would also cover the Read Good challenge prompt of No Comfort November. So that's going to be my challenge prompt book as well. So you can see already that is a pretty substantial cake there, and I've got so many books in front of me that I want to read, but I'm going to commit to those 4. Only 3 of them are Gothic reading, because I'm not a particularly quick reader, so I'm going to commit to those 4. The rest are just my pile of possibilities. These are the cherries. Oh, in fact, I am going to throw another 2 into the cake mix. Oh my gosh, because for my Taylor Swift book club, my Paper Thin Plans book club, by the 9th of November I'd set a challenge of reading something to do with Elizabeth Taylor and also The Adventures of Pinocchio. Now this, I want to have this as a rabbit hole book, a deep dive rabbit hole book. I've never read The Adventures of Pinocchio, but having looked at the premise of how the book differs from the film, I was horrified. This sees this little wooden boy, or this puppet, going through some horrendous ordeals, and I think there are huge Gothic elements in this. I know it's a fairy tale, but of course here's another cherry book. Fairy tales are very dark, they are very Gothic, they are full of castles and dread and suspense. I think I read in a précis that he even gets his wooden feet burnt. I mean, that's just horrific for a children's story. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to approach reading Pinocchio as a Gothic study, and to read it with a Gothic lens on, and to do some study around it. This is a rabbit hole book that I want to fall down with study. So although you wouldn't necessarily think of Pinocchio as a Gothic tale, I'm going to read it with a Gothic lens, and we're just going to see what happens. And then I'm going to follow the thread from there on. This might lead me down sort of children's literature and the Gothic, who knows? But it's a study rabbit hole that I'm going to jump down. So that's on the cake pile as well, along with my very first Elizabeth Taylor novel. So this is part of the Taylor Swift book club, because of course on her new album she has a track called Elizabeth Taylor. Now I googled which of Elizabeth Taylor's novels is the most Gothic, and this one came up, which is called Palladian, and this is a kind of reworking of Jane Eyre. It says you've got Cassandra Dashwood, who has been orphaned, and she becomes a governess in a huge rambling ramshackle manor called Cropthorne Manor. So there are bullying cousins and a venomous housekeeper. There is somebody that's haunted by the memory of his wife. So I just thought that would be really interesting to read, kind of reworking and homage to the tale of Jane Eyre. So our cake pile has really grown. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books there. To be honest, that is going to push me anyway. If I get to anything else, then brilliant. I don't think I will, but I'm going to show you what's here anyway in the cherries pile, because this will be a rollover for December and January and February as well. So you already saw this. I still haven't read all of Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, which are reworkings of fairy tales. We're on that same idea of fairy tales being Gothic and reading children's literature with that Gothic lens. Now, if you've been following my DIY literature degree, you will know that not only was Gothic sort of a module that I wanted to cover, an early Gothic, but also fairy tales. I don't think I've done that well with fairy tales. Just like with the Gothic module, I realised that fairy tales is a huge, expansive topic, and I very quickly realised that the month I had allocated for fairy tale study did nothing at all. I very quickly reduced my fairy tale study down to just looking at the fairy tale of Little Red Riding Hood. So with that Gothic lens on, I would really love to get to this before the end of this year. So this is edited by Jack Zipes. This is the trials and tribulations of Little Red Riding Hood, and basically gives you a history of all the different tales of Little Red Riding Hood and her trials and tribulations. So for me that sits a little bit like the idea of reading Pinocchio through a Gothic lens. Like, there are trials and tribulations in here, there's trials and tribulations in here, which if you find out about the history of Little Red Riding Hood, the red cloak was linked to menstruation and coming of age and being sexually alluring, and it was a warning tale for young girls once they hit that phase not to be tricked by men. It was a moralistic tale about saving yourself and not being duped to be on your own with men. Very, very dark tones and messages for a child's tale. Quite Gothic in a way. So there are a number of sort of children's literature and fairy tale books I would love to get to. Also, I have this novel by Anne Radcliffe, which I've yet to read, The Castles of Athelin and Dunbayne. I think this might have been her first novel. It's only short, it's a short one, so I do want to get to this one before the end of the year. And of course, Charles Dickens reading. I've been reading Anne Radcliffe, all the works of Anne Radcliffe, all the works of Thomas Hardy, and all the works of Charles Dickens. I am making progress through all of that, but I would love to get to the complete ghost stories of Charles Dickens as well. So this might be a few this month and a few in December as well. I think it would be just so lovely to read this at Christmas time. So that's in the cherries pile as well. And then another Victorian Gothic, which I feel I should have read by now and I haven't, is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I said in my last challenge video that this also fits the prompt of No Grey November, because you've got the lamppost getting rid of the grey on the front cover. And also, like last year, for last year's GothLitNovember, I had the choice of either reading this one or Frankenstein, and I read Frankenstein last year. So I would really, really love to get to this one as well before the end of the year. But also in a charity shop very recently, I also found Craig Russell's international bestseller of Hyde. There is no Jekyll, only Hyde. Wouldn't that make a lovely sort of double reading, to read this and then to read this afterwards? So for those two that are really calling me to have some non-fiction as well. Both of these, you can see they are tabbed. There's no tabs in this one, but both of these I've just read like the opening chapter in both of these. So there's Gothic Literature by Sue Chaplin, which is a York Notes book, and then A Reader's Guide to Essential Criticism of Gothic Fiction by Angela Wright. Yeah, I got up to page 21 in this one. So these have both been started. I'm going to have to restart them because I can't remember what I've read so far. But I would like both of these, to be honest, to be read before the end of the year, just so that I've got that sort of critical analysis of what the Gothic is before the end of my first year, considering that it was a module of study. So I think if I can get Anne Radcliffe, all her works read, and then these two, I think that's some really good progress for me for year one of my DIY literature degree. So there's two non-fiction going in there again. So the Sue Chaplin book covers a cultural overview, it covers texts, writers and their contexts, it covers critical theories and debates, and it gives you references and resources in there. So that is like quite a nice overview. This book, which is a lot smaller actually, covers what is the Gothic, terrorist novel writing, the contemporary reception of the Gothic, a critical survey of responses to the rise of the Gothic during the Romantic period. You've got terror and horror, Gothic struggles. So I suppose that's that debate between, is it Gothic, is it horror, which is one of the questions that I was keen to answer at the start of my studies. You've got an exploration of the sublime in Gothic literature, the Gothic and the French Revolution, contextualisation of the French Revolution and its perceived impact on the Gothic in Britain. The sanctuary is profaned, religion, nationalism and the Gothic. That idea of the sanctuary, of like corridors and women escaping to nunneries, it's all there. Anne Radcliffe is absolutely full of that. An exploration of the Gothic genre's perceived anti-Catholicism and its attendant nationalism. So you're kind of getting a little bit that sort of political there. The narrative resembles a delirious dream, so the psychoanalytical readings of the Gothic, an appraisal of different psychoanalytical approaches that have been used for reading Gothic fiction. And in chapter 6 it covers aspects of the female Gothic and gender and the Gothic, which will be quite interesting. So loads of different really interesting study areas there. Right, I have a few more left. You can see why I say these are cherries and not the cake. I would absolutely love to get to a Laura Purcell. I have 2 Laura Purcell books on my shelves. I have The Silent Companions, which I haven't read, and I have Bone China by Laura Purcell as well. I would love to get to this as well, so that's another contemporary. So I would love to finish my reading of Anne Rice's The Mayfair Witches trilogy. So this is a massive chunker of a book. The Witching Hour, I read this at the end of last year. I loved it. The first Anne Rice I've ever read. Really, really loved it. And then I was looking out in a charity shop for the remaining 2 books. Don't you know that I got handed this book, which is the second book in the trilogy, Lasher, for free? I walked into a charity shop and the lady said, oh, we're going to throw away all of the witchy books because we're a Christian shop. Do you like sort of witchy supernatural books? Would you like a bag of books? And this was on the top of the pile. So I've got Lasher, which I still need to read. And then later on, in a kind of different edition, but that's fine, I found the final book in the trilogy, Taltos. So I've got 2 more books of this trilogy to read. I would love this trilogy finished this year, so it's not dragging on, because what I really don't want to have to do is to reread The Witching Hour at over 1,000 pages long. I would like to be able to read these 2 while I still remember The Witching Hour. So there's some Anne Rice there as well, so some contemporary novels. So you can see the Gothic studies are coming on a treat. I've really loved doing it. You can see I've got an awful lot there to read. Of course I'm not going to get to all of that, but it is going to spill over into next year, which is lovely. I think to give yourself a few months and to not overburden yourself and to not put pressure on yourself to read absolutely everything, to reduce study modules down where you need. I mean, how I thought I was going to study all of the Gothic in just a couple of months, I don't know. I mean, just to reduce it down, just to say, okay, let's get a feel for Anne Radcliffe. That's been a lot of reading along with everything else that I'm doing. So hopefully the main goal is by the end of the year I have read and completed all of the works of Anne Radcliffe, and that will be fantastic. But we shall see. So are you enjoying Gothic reading? What is your favourite Gothic book? Give me a list of books that you think I might not have heard of to add to next year's study. Tell me what you're reading in November. Are you going to take part in GothLitNovember? Let me know. I will leave the links for GothLitNovember videos past and current. Go and check out the channels, they are fantastic. I'll also link some videos by my friend Nicole, a cottage witch. She is also a huge fan of GothLitNovember. I always have a great time watching Nicole's videos as well. So go and check those out if you are interested. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.